Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 on Thursday the 24th of August. My name is Brian Liddy. I'll start the programme with our Ukraine update day 547. Russia's aviation authority has said Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin, who launched an abortive mutiny in June, and top Wagner commander Dmitry Utkin were on board a private jet en route to Moscow to St. Petersburg when it crashed near the village of Kuzenkino in the Tver region on Wednesday. All 10 people on board the plane, 7 passengers and 3 crew members, have died, according to Russia's emergencies ministry. Flight Radar 24 online tracking showed the Embraer Legacy 600, plane number RA02795, dropped off the radar at 6:11 p.m. Moscow time. An unverified video clip posted to social media showed a plane resembling a private jet falling out of the sky. Another unverified clip showed burning wreckage on the ground. The plane showed no sign of problems until a precipitous drop in its final 30 seconds, according to flight tracking data. It made a sudden downward vertical, said Ian Petchnik of Flight Radars 24. Within about 30 seconds, it plummeted more than 8,000 feet from its cruising altitude of 28,000 feet. The cause of the crash is unclear, but Prigozhin's allies quickly accused the Russian Defense Ministry of assassinating him. Russian investigators opened a criminal investigation. There are unconfirmed reports the plane had been shot down by one or more surface-to-air missiles. The other 5 passengers were named as and apologies for any mispronunciations here, Sergei Propustin, Yevgeny Makaryan, Alexander Totman, Valery Chekolov, and Nikolai Matusev. The crew were named as Commander Alexei Levshin, co-pilot Rustam Karimov, and flight attendant Kristina Raspopova. In addition to Utkin, Prigozhin had been accompanied on the plane by a cameraman, Wagner's logistics manager, and Prigozhin's personal security detail, according to Fontanka, a St. Petersburg news outlet that has covered Prigozhin's operations extensively. There was no official comment from the Kremlin or the Defense Ministry on Prigozhin's reported death, but I do have a statement from Vladimir Putin. It's just come in. Vladimir Putin has confirmed the death of Yevgeny Prigozhin, calling the Wagner mercenary chief a talented businessman with a difficult fate. In a meeting at the Kremlin, the Russian president addressed the crash of Prigozhin's business jet for the first time, offering condolences to the families of the 10 people on board. He said that Prigozhin had returned to Russia from Africa on Wednesday and had met some officials without specifying whom. Putin said he had known Prigozhin since the early 1990s. He was a man with a difficult fate. He made some serious mistakes in his life, Putin said. He achieved the needed results both for himself and for a joint effort that I had asked him about during the last months. It appeared he was referring to the war in Ukraine and possibly the efforts of Wagner fighters in the city of Bakhmut. He was a talented businessman, said Putin, promising a full investigation. The type of jet has a good safety record, with only one recorded incident in more than 20 years of service, and that was not related to mechanical failure. Embraer said that it was aware of a plane crash in Russia involving a Legacy 600 aircraft, but it did not have further information about the case and had not been providing support services for the jet since 2019, when the plane was placed under international sanctions. There was little surprise abroad over Prigozhin's apparent death. After a briefing on the incident, President Biden said, "I don't know for a fact what happened, but I'm not surprised. There is not much that happens in Russia that Putin is not behind, but I don't know enough on the answer." Russia has also relieved General Sergei Surovikin of his command of the Russian aerospace forces in the highest level sacking yet of a military commander after Prigozhin's abortive mutiny. Surovikin was seen as an ally of Wagner in the Defence Ministry, and questions had been asked about whether he or other senior commanders aided the mutiny or had prior knowledge of Prigozhin's plans. A Russian military pilot is reported to have defected with his helicopter to Ukraine after a 6-month intelligence operation. Ukrainian officials appeared to confirm that the aircraft had landed in Ukraine, but did not give any further details. Countries hardest hit by the climate crisis will be supported by up to £24 million in Scottish Government funding, the First Minister Humza Yousaf announced today when he welcomed the US Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, to Scotland. 3 aid agencies, Scottish Catholic International Aid Fund, or SCIAF, the DAI and the NIRAS, will each receive up to £8 million over the next 3 years from the Scottish Government's Climate Justice Fund to support work in Rwanda, Malawi and Zambia respectively. It will enable them to work closely with communities to manage the material and social effects of climate change, funding projects such as building more climate-resilient housing or repairing village flood defences. The First Minister launched the programme today as he introduced a lecture by US Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, focusing on the climate crisis. It is the first in a series of annual Scottish Global Dialogues taking place during the Edinburgh International Festival to discuss global challenges, organised by Beyond Borders Scotland and the WS Society with support from the Scottish Government. During his introductory address, the First Minister is expected to say, "The countries which are the worst affected by the climate crisis are often those which have done little or nothing to cause it. The injustice at the heart of the global climate crisis is why Scotland became the first country in the world to establish a climate justice fund more than a decade ago, and why we have led the way in being the first global North country to commit funding to address loss and damage." He went on to say, "Today we are able to announce the start of the Climate Just Communities programme in Malawi, Zambia and Rwanda. The programme will work with local communities, including with marginalised groups, so that they can identify their own priorities and build their resilience to the climate crisis. The £24 million programme that we are confirming today is a significant commitment from a devolved government. It will make a real difference to the communities we are working with, and it's a further sign of Scotland's determination to be a good global citizen and to do our bit in tackling the climate crisis here in Scotland and across the world." The US Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, said, "I'm honoured to be given the opportunity to speak at a historic site like the Signet Library to address the climate crisis at this critical moment. With just a few months to go before COP28 in Dubai, we all need to ensure our unwavering commitment to addressing one of the world's greatest threats." Rishi Sunak breached Parliament's Code of Conduct by failing to properly declare his wife's shareholding in a childcare company which stood to benefit from new government policy, but did so inadvertently, Parliament's standards watchdog has concluded. An investigation was launched in April by Daniel Greenberg, Parliament's Commissioner for Standards, into a potential breach of transparency rules relating to his links to the firm Koru Kids, in which his wife Akshata Murthy is an investor. Publishing the conclusions of his investigation on Wednesday, Greenberg said Sunak should have declared the shareholding when being questioned on the policy by the liaison committee of senior crossbench MPs on the 28th of March. But he said he was satisfied that the Prime Minister had confused the rules on registering and declaring interests. Parliament's Commissioner for Standards said, "Having considered the information available to me, I have decided that the breach of the code appears to have been inadvertent. I confirm that the matter is now closed." Greenberg, who can refer lawmakers who breach the rules to a committee that has the power to suspend or expel them from Parliament, added that he had instead decided to conclude the inquiry via a rectification procedure. Rectification procedures can include offering advice requiring the individual concerned to apologise or to correct the register of members' financial interests. In a letter to Greenberg, published by the Commissioner's Office, Sunak apologised for confusing the language of registration and declaration. The PM said, "I am pleased that this matter will now be concluded by way of rectification." During Sunak's appearance before the Liaison Committee, the Labour MP Catherine McKinnell asked him about a childcare initiative in the recent budget. Koru Kids was among 6 private childcare providers set to benefit from a pilot scheme proposed in the budget to incentivise people who become childminders. When McKinnell asked Sunak if he had anything to declare in relation to the scheme, he replied, "No, all my disclosures are declared in the normal way." It later emerged that bosses from the company attended a Downing Street reception hours after Sunak's appearance before the committee. A subsequent letter to the committee from Sunak said that because he was being asked questions in his capacity as Prime Minister, the relevant register of interest was that for ministers, and his interest in Koru Kids had been rightly declared. Although the separate register of MPs' interests is updated every fortnight, the register for ministers, supposedly published twice a year, had not appeared for nearly 12 months at the time. The initiation of the investigation in April was the 3rd such probe into the Prime Minister, who has been fined by police for breaching COVID rules and for not wearing a seatbelt. A 5th delay on the introduction of post-Brexit import checks on food and fresh produce arriving in Britain is to be officially announced imminently, according to reports. The decision to once again push back plans to enforce the controls, which have been in place for exports from the UK to the EU, is linked to concerns that the move could further fuel price inflation during the cost of living crisis, while traders have also asked for more time to adapt to the new rules. The plan to delay the new border controls has been backed by the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, according to the Financial Times, which broke the news earlier this month that the postponement was on the way. The government's post-Brexit border strategy, including inspections of animals and plant products arriving in Britain, was originally supposed to be introduced in 2021. According to the most recent timetable, import checks had been expected to be introduced in 3 stages over the course of a year, beginning with new paperwork requirements, including health certificates for certain animal and plant products, as well as high-risk food products from the end of October this year. Meanwhile, physical checks at the UK border had been expected to begin on the 31st of January 2024. However, after the latest delay, the schedule has moved back by 3 months, according to the FT, meaning that new paperwork will not be needed until the end of January, while the physical inspections of goods will not start until the end of April. A full announcement regarding the new timetable and the final border strategy, known as the Target Operating Model, or TOM, is expected to be published shortly by the Cabinet Office. Earlier this month, the National Farmers Union Scotland hit out at the uncertainty and asymmetric playing field left by what was the 4th delay to the introduction of checks, with President Martin Kennedy saying, SNP Business and International Trade spokesman Richard Thompson MP, I'm sorry, there seems to be a missing quote there, commenting, SNP Business and International Trade spokesperson Richard Thompson MP said, Brexit has been an unmitigated disaster for households and business right across Scotland, particularly for those in farming and fishing communities. While the UK government continues to impose this damaging Brexit, Scottish farmers are facing the devastating impact of higher costs, mountains of red tape, a shortage of workers and eye-watering delays over border controls. He went on to say, now, as farmers and businesses are reeling from the economic impact of Brexit and Westminster's cost of living crisis, they've been dealt even more uncertainty. The Scottish agri-food sector deserves better than to be messed about by a UK government which has no consideration for food and welfare standards or for the sector's continued success. The SNP has called on the UK government to deliver more targeted support to households during the cost of living crisis, as new analysis reveals thousands of people will start the winter behind on their energy bills. Analysis from Citizens Advice has shown that 46,431 people with energy debts contacted charity for advice in the first 6 months of 2023. That's a 17% increase on the same period last year. On average, those who phoned the charity had built up debts of around £1,711, up one-third on 2019 figures. Amy Callaghan MP has warned that the Tories at Westminster have a responsibility to support households this winter, given it was their economic mismanagement that left households abandoned in the first place. Commenting, Amy Callaghan MP said, "With winter fast approaching, the UK government must set out exactly what levels of targeted support it plans on delivering during this Westminster-made cost of living crisis. Households right across Scotland are crying out for help, suffering from the actions of an economically illiterate UK government who care more about filling the pockets of their friends than helping working families. It was the Tories at Westminster who crashed the economy. They have a responsibility to fix it," she said. In contrast, the SNP Scottish Government continued to support households through bold and progressive actions like the Scottish Child Payment and Best Start grant, not to mention spending a staggering £600 million per year just to mitigate cruel Westminster policies. The UK is facing a stark choice between paying higher taxes or accepting an inevitable deterioration in public services and the welfare state, according to an in-depth study of the UK tax system by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, or the IFS. The think tank said the already high level of taxes and the weak prospect for growth meant voters faced a tough choice. The IFS said if the political choice was to pay higher taxes, root and branch reform of the system would be needed to reduce the economic pain that higher levies would involve. This was because every one of the UK's principal taxes was flawed, it added. The report, which was produced in partnership with the innovation foundation Nesta, noted that capital was taxed at a lower rate than income. The income tax system has been made more complex since the Conservatives came to power in 2010. Excuse me. Exemptions from VAT cost the Exchequer £100 billion a year. The council tax system in England and Scotland was based on property valuations dating back to 1991, and the environmental levies lacked consistency. Helen Miller, a Deputy Director of the IFS and Head of the Tax Sector, said, "The tax and spend choices that face future governments are not enviable. The big picture choice effectively boils down to increase taxes or reduce the size of the state. Living standards are shaped not only by how much tax revenue is raised and what it is spent on, but also by how it is raised. It is hard to think of a tax that doesn't need serious reform." She went on to say, "Better designed taxes would make us more productive and therefore ultimately richer. Taxes could also be fairer if we stopped taxing very similar people in very different ways. Taxes as a share of national income have been rising in recent years and are on course to hit the highest level in 70 years in the decade. While high by historical standards, the IFS said taxes were not high compared with the rest of Western Europe. The think tank said it was not inevitable that taxes would rise, but added, "Without tax rises, UK public service and benefits provision will not simply tread water, it will deteriorate. Unless levels of tax increase substantially, a reduction in the scope of the public services that the British state provides is likely inevitable." She went on to say, unless something major changes, such as an acceleration in economic growth, it will not be possible to maintain public services and keep tax at current levels. The financial accounts of political parties and accounting units with income or expenditure over £250,000 have been published today by the Electoral Commission. The accounts of 18 political parties and 12 accounting units in the United Kingdom have been published for the year ending 31st of December 2022. Louise Edwards, Director of Regulation and Digital Transformation at the Electoral Commission, said, "We are committed to making sure political funding is transparent. Larger parties spend and receive considerable sums of money, so it's important that information on their finances is accessible to the public. Publishing their accounts allows voters to see how parties are funded and choose to spend their money. Party income or expenditure over £250,000. 19 parties in the UK reported having an income or expenditure of more than £250,000. We are publishing the accounts of 18 parties today, having agreed an extended deadline for Britain First. The Ulster Unionist Party was granted an extension, and we received their accounts by the deadline of 22nd of August. In total, these 18 parties reported £99,993,948 of income and £101,686,906 of expenditure. This compares with 19 parties that reported income or expenditure of over £250,000 in 2021, reporting totals of £101,162,626 of income and £107,657,216 of expenditure. Hope you're all keeping up there at the back. The income and expenditure for the parties operating in Scotland and their Scottish accounting units are as follows. The Alba Party's income was £480,056. Their expenditure was £462,631, which means they had a positive balance of £17,425. The Conservative and Unionist Party had an income of £30,682,000 and an expenditure of £33,062,000, which means that they have a negative balance of £2,380,000. And just to be clear, that's the UK Conservative and Unionist Party. The Labour Party has a Scottish accounting unit which has an income of £773,000. Sorry, I'll start that again. Scottish Labour Party, the Scottish accounting unit, has an income of £773,999 and an expenditure of £897,786, which is a negative balance of £123,787. The Liberal Democrats Scottish accounting unit has an income of £885,635, but their expenditure is £594,348. That's a positive balance of £291,287. The Scottish Green Party has an income of £566,443, but an expenditure of £594,634. That's a negative balance of minus £28,191. And finally, the Scottish National Party has an income of £4,248,625, an expenditure of £5,052,903, which is a negative balance of £804,278. All registered political parties must submit annual statements of accounts. Political parties with income or expenditure of more than £250,000 are required by law to independently audit their accounts and include this report in their submission. The fact that a statement of accounts has been placed on the Commission's website should not be taken to indicate that the Electoral Commission has verified or validated it. Donald Trump is expected to surrender at the Fulton County Jail this evening on racketeering and conspiracy charges over his attempts to overturn the 2020 election results, submitting to the criminal justice process in Georgia that will involve him being processed just like any other defendant. Trump's arrival in Georgia follows a presidential debate featuring his main rivals for the 2024 Republican nomination, a race in which the former US president remains the overwhelmingly dominant frontrunner despite his many legal troubles. Trump had his legal team negotiate his booking to take place during the prime-time viewing hours for the cable news network, as he sought to discredit the charges and distract from the indignity of the surrender by turning it into a spectacle. However, Trump will be booked by authorities without the special privileges afforded to him in his other criminal cases, being subject to a mugshot that he had desperately sought to avoid, having his fingerprints taken, as well as having his height and weight recorded. This is Trump's fourth indictment since leaving office. He was charged in a 41-count indictment by the Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, last week, which described Trump and 18 allies as having engaged in a criminal enterprise to reverse his 2020 election defeat. The bond for Trump was agreed at $200,000, the highest amount of any of his co-defendants, including his former lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who turned himself in for booking a day earlier after his bond was set at $150,000 after being charged with principally the same counts. The schedule will involve Trump arriving at the Rice Street Jail, located northwest of downtown Atlanta, in the early evening, and the motorcade is expected to snake around into the jail premises down a road lined with dozens of TV cameras. The strategy to turn the surrender into a made-for-television circus is believed to be an effort to discredit the indictments and put his own spin on the charges. Ahead of the surrender, Trump shook up his legal team and retained the top Georgia attorney, Stephen Sadow, who filed a notice of appearance with the Fulton County Superior Court as lead counsel, replacing Drew Findling, Trump's other lawyer in the case. Jennifer Little is staying on. The reason for the abrupt recalibration was unclear, and Trump's aides suggested it was unrelated to performance. Still, Trump has a record of firing lawyers who represented him during criminal investigations but were unable to stave charges. Findling was also unable to exempt Trump from having his mugshot taken, something which is believed to have irritated Trump, even though the Fulton County's Sheriff's Office has always indicated they would not make such an accommodation. Once the booking is complete, Trump is expected to be released immediately on conditions that include stringent witness intimidation restrictions that have not been put in place for his co-defendants, court filings show, until he is due back in state court for arraignment. Japan has begun discharging more than 1 million tons of contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean from direct Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in a move that has prompted China to announce an immediate blanket ban on all seafood imports from Japan and sparked anger in nearby fishing communities. The plant's operator, Tokyo Electric Power, or TEPCO, pumped a small quantity of water from the plant today, 2 days after the plan was approved by Japan's government. TEPCO said the release began at 1:03 p.m. local time, that's 04:03 GMT, and it had not identified any abnormalities with the seawater pump or surrounding facilities. Monitors from the UN Atomic Watchdog, which has endorsed the plan, were due to be on site for the procedure, while TEPCO workers were scheduled to take water samples later today. The discharge, which is expected to take 30 to 40 years, has caused anger in neighbouring countries and concern among fishers that it will destroy their industry as consumers steer clear of seafood caught in and around Fukushima. Today, China's customs agency announced it would completely suspend the import of aquatic products originating in Japan, effective immediately, in order to prevent risk of radioactive contamination of food safety. The Chinese government has been highly critical of the planned water release, branding it extremely selfish and irresponsible. In a statement, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said, "The ocean is the common property of all humanity, and forcibly starting the discharge of Fukushima's nuclear wastewater into the ocean is an extremely selfish and irresponsible act that ignores international public interests." South Korean police arrested at least 14 people who entered a building housing the Japanese embassy in Seoul during a protest against the release today. How to dispose of wastewater that has built up at the site on Japan's northeast coast has proved a diplomatic headache for the government, despite support for its approach from the UN's nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. The water became contaminated after it was used to cool 3 nuclear reactors that melted down after Fukushima Daiichi was struck by a powerful tsunami in March 2011. The waves knocked out the plant's backup electricity supply and forced the evacuation of 160,000 people in the world's worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl. On-site technology is used to remove most harmful substances, but it is unable to filter out tritium, a radioactive isotope of hydrogen that is considered to be relatively harmless because, according to TEPCO, it emits very weak levels of radiation and does not accumulate or concentrate inside the human body. Critics of the discharge say a lack of long-term data means it is impossible to say with certainty that tritium poses no threat to human health or the marine environment. Greenpeace said the radiological risks had not been fully assessed and that the biological impacts of tritium, carbon-14, strontium-90 and iodine-129, which will be released as part of the discharge, have been ignored. New funding will support more affordable homes and facilities in remote and rural areas. Provided jointly by the Scottish Government and Nationwide Foundation, funding for Communities Housing Trust and South of Scotland Community Housing over 3 years will deliver affordable housing projects. Housing Minister Paul McLennan made the announcement during a visit to Auchtercairn development in Gairloch, Wester Ross, where Communities Housing Trust, together with Alban Housing Association and Highland Council, have delivered a mix of 25 affordable homes, shops, a cafe, tourism hub and education, community and commercial facilities. Community housing trusts are charitable organisations which engage with local communities to promote, support and develop community-led affordable homes. The funding meets a commitment in the Butte House Agreement to ensure community housing trusts are adequately funded so they can support the delivery of rural homes. Housing Minister Paul McLennan said, "Community housing trusts play an essential role in supporting the delivery of affordable homes in rural and island areas. This development is a great example of how community-led organisations can build homes that meet the needs of local people. That's why I am pleased the Scottish Government is providing new funding for these organisations, provided in partnership with the Nationwide Foundation." He went on to say good quality housing is essential to attract and retain people in remote, rural and island communities, and the Scottish Government has committed to delivering 110,000 affordable homes by 2032, with at least 10% in remote, rural and island areas. We are providing support of up to £30 million over this Parliament through our Rural and Island Housing Fund. We are also developing a remote, rural and islands housing action plan to be published in autumn. A major scientific expedition to understand biodiversity and ecosystems along Europe's coastlines comes to the University of St Andrews this week. The expedition, entitled Traversing European Coastlines, or TREC, will visit the University of St Andrews Scottish Oceans Institute, that's the SOI, from Friday the 25th of August to Friday the 1st of September, and will see a research vessel moored in St Andrews Bay. The 2-year project is gathering information about how organisms interact with each other and their environment at a molecular level. St Andrews is one of over 120 sampling sites across 22 European countries. In Scotland, TREC has already visited St Abbs, and there will be additional sampling at Edinburgh Tentsmuir National Nature Reserve in North Fife and Aberdeen. Led by the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, together with the Tara Ocean Foundation, the Tara Oceans Consortium and the European Marine Biology Resource Centre, TREC also involves many national and local research institutes, such as the Scottish Oceans Institute, or the SOI. While at the SOI, mobile labs will sample on land while the schooner Tara samples out at sea. The scientists will collect and analyse soil, sediment, aerosol, water samples and small living organisms to generate a census of biodiversity on land and at sea, while also recording environmental conditions such as temperature, pH and salinity. They will also record the presence of pollutants such as antibiotics and pesticides. Importantly, the pan-European nature of the project means that samples are taken in a standardised way, enabling scientists to compare and probe data across Europe in a way not previously possible. Director of the SOI, Dr. David Ferrier, said, It is very exciting to be a part of a major expedition like TREC. This is big science at its best, producing a wealth of urgently needed data that is made freely available to help address major global challenges such as climate change, biodiversity management, and the health and sustainability of our oceans and the life connected with them, including humans. He went on to say, our seas and coastlines host an extremely rich diversity of life and play a critical role in the stability and sustainability of wider ecosystems. However, planetary changes such as global warming, human activity and pollution lead to ecosystem destruction, loss and diversity, and spread of antibiotic resistance. By bringing new data and expertise together and making it openly available to the scientific community, TREC aims to help understand coastal ecosystems and address global challenges. Well, that's it for this evening, but before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So, to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, we thank you very much. You know that our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 per month, please do consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. Right now we have a pressing need to raise £30,000 to pay our bills and ensure that we are able to continue making programmes like this one. Meanwhile, thank you to the generosity of our supporters. We have now raised nearly £14,500, but we still really need to raise the remaining £15,500 by the end of this week, if possible. So, in the meantime, good night and thank you for watching.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.